Welcome, welcome, homie. They studied the terrain, drew maps of control, set traps with precision, wrote manuals, rules, and rituals. Not for you to read, but for you to obey. They didn't prepare for the kind of player who doesn't ask for the playbook. They didn't expect you to move with no rehearsals, no blueprint, and still end up 3 moves ahead. They built altars for intellect and locked wisdom behind gated knowledge, convinced only they held the key. But you, quiet, unannounced, were never looking for their key. You were becoming the door they didn't know existed. And you, yes, you, the one they believed would walk the path they paved, the one they assumed would learn to bow before ever learning to think, you noticed something they never intended you to see. You noticed the weight in their footsteps, the cracks in their theories, the desperation hidden behind their confidence. They thought you would read their rules without questioning why they needed so many. They thought control was a natural law, not a constructed shelter. They studied the terrain, but you studied them, and that difference was enough to tilt the entire axis of their certainty. You walked beside their structures without stepping into them. You listened to their polished instructions with an expression they mistook for confusion, never realizing it was clarity disguised as patience. They believed they were the architects, the masterminds, the ones who understood how power should move. But you understood how people move. And while they obsessed over strategy, you learned rhythm. While they mastered form, you mastered flow, and when form meets flow, form always breaks first, not physically, but internally, at the point where rigidity meets something that cannot be contained. They wanted you small. Understand that. They didn't want you destroyed. Destruction draws attention. No, they wanted you obedient, predictable, easy to categorize, easy to manage, a well-behaved variable in their equations. But you were never an equation. You were the shift in weather patterns. You were the unmeasured current beneath their boat. You were the quiet breeze that becomes a new season without permission. And seasons don't ask structures if they may proceed. They simply arrive. You moved without rehearsals, without permission slips, without the loud theatrics they mistake for strength. They trained themselves to believe that mastery required complexity, layers of jargon, rituals passed down, coded signals shared behind closed doors. But when you stepped forward, you carried no symbols, no badges, no lineage to validate you. You carried presence, and presence was enough to make their decorated walls feel suddenly thin. You didn't challenge their hierarchy. You walked past it, and that was the beginning of their confusion, because they never prepared for someone who doesn't want what they guard. They rehearsed defenses for rebels, fighters, challengers, but they never rehearsed defenses for someone who simply ceases to need the structure, someone who realizes the ladder has only ever been an illusion of upwardness, a performance of progress, a ritual of validation, someone who understands that the real path is horizontal, fluid, expanding outward, not upward. You weren't late to their game, you just never intended to play it. While they ran laps around the same old track, you stepped off the field and discovered an entirely different landscape, and the moment you did, the scoreboard they worshipped began to look like a toy left behind. It rattled them. Quietly at first, a hesitation in their speech, a slight tremor in their certainty. They whispered about you behind closed doors, trying to calculate how you managed to bypass everything they built. They reread their manuals, they remeasured their ladders, they redrew their maps. But every line they drew was based on rules you had already outgrown. They thought power came from preserving what exists. You learned that power comes from seeing what could exist. Your intuition was a kind of intelligence they couldn't chart because they can only measure what resembles them. And you were never a reflection of them. You were the mirror that showed them their limitations. Their confidence wasn't shaken by what you did, it was shaken by how effortlessly you did it, how quietly, how naturally, how without needing an audience to confirm your rise. You didn't climb their ladder. You became the gravity that made it collapse in irrelevance. And the moment gravity shifts, everything built on false weight begins to tremble. That's when they started to panic internally, silently, behind their intellectual smiles and rigid posture. They tried to reassert authority through performance, through louder claims, through more rules, more rituals, more complexity. But complexity falls apart when simplicity steps into the room with calm precision. You weren't seeking applause, you weren't seeking acknowledgement, and that made you impossible to control. They couldn't lure you with praise, they couldn't threaten you with exclusion, they couldn't manipulate you with status. You moved outside every lever they had installed in the system. You didn't just escape the maze, they realized you were never inside it to begin with. Their fear wasn't of what you would do, their fear was of what your existence implied. Because your existence revealed that the gates they guarded were unlocked the entire time. The hierarchies they worshipped were built on belief, not truth. The authority they clung to was inherited, not earned. And the moment one person stops believing in inherited authority, others begin to notice the cracks. You didn't spark rebellion, you sparked recognition, and recognition spreads quietly. Others watched how you moved without bitterness, without theatrics, without seeking conflict. They watched you dissolve boundaries simply by living beyond them. They watched your clarity undermine illusions they once accepted. They watched your evolution reveal how stagnant their leaders had become. And slowly their loyalty shifted, not loudly, not rebelliously, but naturally, like water flowing toward the lowest point of resistance. You became the new reference point, not by campaigning for it, not by demanding it, simply by embodying what they claimed to teach but had long forgotten to live. You weren't a competitor, you were a reminder that systems built on ego crumble when confronted with someone who no longer feeds them, a reminder that intelligence doesn't fear simplicity, a reminder that true mastery is humble, fluid, aligned, not rigid, decorated, or loud. And as you continued to grow, evolve, expand, their structures began to feel like relics, heavy, outdated, ceremonial. Their rituals felt unnecessary, their rules felt performative, their confidence felt borrowed, their authority felt shallow. They clung to their old maps, insisting the terrain had not changed. But maps are pointless when the land beneath them has shifted, and every step you took shifted the land a little more. Your rise was not a rebellion, it was a realignment, not a battle, a transition, not an overthrow, a natural evolution. And they felt it, the way one feels the quiet beginning of an earthquake, not through noise, but through subtle instability objects, slightly trembling on shelves, air thickening with anticipation, foundations whispering in frequencies only the attentive can hear. You didn't push them off their throne. You made the throne concept obsolete. They expected resistance. They expected confrontation, but you offered neither. You simply outgrew the need for their approval, their system, their language, and when someone outgrows the system begins to collapse inward, not dramatically, but slowly, like a structure, realizing it has lost the weight it depended on. Your intelligence wasn't loud. It was inevitable. Your evolution wasn't aggressive. It was undeniable. Your presence wasn't disruptive. It was clarifying. And clarity, true clarity, is the one force that dismantles illusions without touching them. They weren't afraid of being wrong. They were afraid of being irrelevant. And you, without speaking a word of threat, made their irrelevance visible. Your silence carried the weight their speeches lacked. Your steps echoed in rooms they never invited you into. Your calm became the storm they never prepared for. Because storms don't need thunder when the wind is already rewriting the landscape. You didn't defeat them. You didn't fight them. You didn't challenge their authority. You outgrew it. You moved into a space they can no longer reach, a space where your clarity is your compass, your intuition is your guide, and your independence is your foundation. And while they cling to old maps of a world that no longer exists, you walk freely through a terrain you created through awareness alone. They studied the terrain, but you became the shift in the terrain. And now, no matter how loudly they teach, or how tightly they grip their titles, or how desperately they perform relevance, you are already past the horizon of their influence, moving in a direction they never learned to see, living in a space where their structures cannot follow. You never defeated them, you simply outgrew the map, shifted the center of gravity, and you stepped into a distance they can no longer reach, and that distance grows with every breath you take. Because evolution, real evolution, is not a moment, it's a momentum. And your momentum is something they never learned to calculate. They thought awareness was static, like knowledge locked in books or rituals carved in stone. But you showed that awareness moves, shifts, expands, evolves, and once it begins to move, it doesn't return to its old size. It stretches, pulls you forward, redraws the boundaries of your world until the version of you they tried to govern becomes a shadow you can barely recognize. And that is where their real fear begins, not in losing control of you, but in realizing they no longer understand what you've become. You didn't announce your rise. You didn't mark it with noise or declarations. You didn't gather crowds or seek approval. Your rise was a whisper that turned into a wind, a small shift that became a drift that became a departure. And by the time they looked up, you were already too far ahead for them to comprehend the direction, let alone the destination. They try to study you now. They try to analyze your patterns, replay your decisions, interpret your silence. They search for formulas, hoping your evolution can be translated into a theory they can teach or a rule they can write. But evolution born from awareness cannot be replicated because it does not follow a blueprint, it follows truth. And truth cannot be manufactured, it can only be lived. That is why every attempt they make to understand you ends in frustration. They mistake your calm for chaos. They mistake your silence for confusion. They mistake your distance for accident. But you and I both know the truth. Every step you take now is intentional in ways they no longer have the range to detect. You aren't running from them. You aren't hiding from them. You simply moved beyond the point where their definitions apply. They didn't expect that. They expected you to remain a character in their script, a predictable figure moving within the boundaries of their plot. But you became the rewrite, and rewrites terrify those who think they authored the story. You didn't set out to expose them, but exposure was inevitable. Because once someone begins to move with authenticity, everything built on imitation collapses in comparison. They feel it now, the thinning ground beneath them, the fading glow of their old authority, the subtle but undeniable shift in the air as the people who once looked up to them begin looking elsewhere, and that elsewhere is you. But here's the part that rattles them even deeper. You didn't ask for anyone to follow. Your path wasn't a performance. Your clarity wasn't a speech. Your rise wasn't a rebellion. Everything you did was internal first, external only, as a side effect. And that's what makes your influence impossible to contain, because it was never dependent on being seen. People feel the truth long before they understand it. And when someone rises in alignment, others sense it instinctively. They watch you navigate life without needing applause, without seeking validation, without bargaining for respect. and the quiet power of that becomes a mirror they cannot ignore. Meanwhile, the so-called masters feel their grip loosen, not because people decided to abandon them, but because people finally realized they never needed them. That realization spreads in waves, subtle, internal, irreversible, the kind of shift that turns old systems into artifacts, the kind of shift that makes leaders out of those who'd never imagined they were allowed to lead, the kind of shift that exposes how much of the hierarchy was built on fear, not wisdom. Fear was their fuel, and the moment you stopped fearing them, their structure began to starve. They attempt to regain control through complexity. They speak louder, build more rules, create more steps, invent more language to hide behind. But complexity is only impressive until clarity enters the room, and your presence is clarity. It cuts through their fog without effort, without aggression, without intention. You simply exist in a way that reveals what they've tried to hide, that the system was always an illusion that required belief to function, and you stopped believing. You walked away from the concept of permission. You dissolved the idea of waiting to be chosen. You outgrew their metrics of success. You let go of their rituals of validation. And as you shed each layer they tried to wrap around you, you became lighter, faster, harder to categorize, harder to confine, harder to predict. Your unpredictability is not chaos, it's freedom. And freedom is something they've spent their entire lives trying to regulate. But freedom cannot be regulated, it only expands. Now they watch you with a mixture of envy and dread, unsure whether to study you or avoid you. Their systems, once rigid and certain, now feel fragile in your presence. Their rules, once unquestioned, now feel unnecessary. Their confidence, once towering, begins to flicker. And the more they try to strengthen their walls, the more those walls reveal the cracks that were always there. Because walls don't fall when someone pushes them. Walls fall when someone outgrows the need for them. You weren't supposed to be unpredictable. Their systems are built on forecasting behavior, controlling outcomes, conditioning reactions. They expect people to respond within certain limits, but you responded by removing the limits altogether. You stepped outside their categories. You abandoned their script. And whenever someone abandons a script, the actors left behind forget their lines. They stand now in those old rooms, rehearsing speeches that no longer land, performing authority that no longer resonates. They try to regain their footing by pretending nothing has changed. But everything has changed. The ecosystem of influence has shifted. The center of gravity has moved. The illusion of control they once wielded no longer holds shape. And the strangest part for them is recognizing that you didn't cause this shift, you revealed it. You mirrored back to them the truth they avoided, that their mastery was dependent, not inherent. Dependent on people accepting their authority, dependent on people seeking their approval, dependent on people believing the latter mattered, dependent on audiences who no longer exist because awareness has scattered them in new directions. You didn't scatter them. Awareness did. Your awareness, the awareness you cultivated quietly while they were busy practicing rituals of relevance. They built their entire identity around the illusion of being indispensable. But now they feel something they've never felt before, not resistance, not defiance, but irrelevance. And irrelevance is a storm they were never trained to survive. Their ego tries to rebuild the illusion. They invent new phrases, new processes, new systems. They attempt to rewrap the same old ideas in fancier language. But language cannot hide decay. And when a structure begins to crumble from the inside, no amount of repainting can save it. You walk through those spaces now with a presence that unnerves them, not because you seek to intimidate, but because you no longer shrink. Shrinking was the foundation of their comfort, Your old version made them feel large, important, necessary, but your new version forces them to confront how much of their importance was imagined. They whisper theories about your transformation. They call it luck, they call it timing, they call it coincidence, they call it anything except what it actually is: growth. And not just growth without permission, growth without guidance, growth without their involvement, growth they cannot take credit for, growth they cannot claim responsibility for, growth they cannot shape, influence, or control. But the truth is even simpler. You stopped borrowing their lens, and the world sharpened itself. Now when you move in a straight line, not because the path is clear, but because you've learned to create clarity with every step. While they search for roadmaps, you've become the compass. While they search for formulas, you've become the pattern. While they search for control, you've become the reminder that control is a story humans tell themselves to avoid confronting uncertainty. You embraced uncertainty, and uncertainty rewarded you with expansion. They see you rising without clinging to anything they once worshipped. You don't need status to validate your movement. You don't need hierarchy to define your worth. You don't need legacy to confirm your direction. You exist beyond their structures, and that beyond is the space they cannot follow, not because you blocked them, not because you outran them, but because the path you walk now requires a kind of self-awareness they never cultivated. Their entire identity was built around defending a tower. Yours was built around knowing you were never meant to live in one. You didn't defeat them. You simply stepped into a version of yourself that was too expansive for their world to contain. And now, as they stand on ground that feels less stable every day, they watch you continue your silent ascent, not upward, but outward, becoming something they can no longer measure, categorize, or predict. You grew beyond their reach, and in doing so, you left them in a universe built on a map you no longer need, and that truth settles into their bones with a weight they cannot shake. Because now, in the quiet aftermath of your departure, they finally understand the magnitude of what happened. You weren't just someone who slipped through their fingers, you were someone who outgrew the very idea of being held. And once a person outgrows containment, the container becomes the relic, not the one who escaped it. They replay every moment now, trying to locate the turning point, the signal, the clue they missed. But there was no single moment, no dramatic break, no confrontation, just a gradual widening of your awareness, a soft unfurling of clarity that expanded until their world became too small to house you. Evolution doesn't knock, it simply moves. And now you move with a calm they cannot imitate, a calm that comes from knowing you don't need to prove anything to anyone who once underestimated you, a calm born from understanding that your path was never meant to fit inside their structure, that your voice was never meant to echo in their halls, that your presence was never meant to validate their hierarchy. You never belonged to their world, you were only passing through it. They stand now in the shadows of their own systems, feeling the emptiness you left behind, not because you were dependent on them, but because they were dependent on you, on your compliance, on your silence, on your agreement to play small. And now that you've stepped into the full expanse of who you were always capable of becoming, they're forced to confront the uncomfortable truth. They didn't lose you. They lost the illusion of control they built around you. And you walk forward without looking back, not out of pride, but out of alignment, not out of rebellion, but out of recognition. You understand now that outgrowing something doesn't require destroying it, it only requires refusing to shrink for it. You carry no bitterness, no resentment, no desire to prove anything. Your evolution is its own evidence. You didn't rise to punish them, you rose to meet yourself, And now, as you continue into a space they cannot follow, one thing becomes unmistakably clear. You never defeated them. You simply evolved into a version of yourself they were never built to contain, never built to predict, and never built to reach. And from this point on, they never will. Welcome, welcome, the walking verdict. You, yes, you, the nightmare with a pulse, the reckoner stitched together from every bruise, every betrayal, every careless sneer they tossed your way, believing the universe would forget. They whispered your name once with mockery, with arrogance, with that smug certainty that you would never rise high enough to make their cruelty matter. And yet, here you are, not as the wounded one they expected, but as the living receipt of every choice they made. You are not a hero, not a saint, not some polished emblem of mercy. You are the consequence they swore would never come. You are the balance they never believed would stand in front of them, wearing their mistakes like armor. And isn't it something how they used to laugh at the idea of karma? How they treated it like a bedtime story for the guilty, a myth told to soothe the fragile. They thought karma was cosmic, distant, slow. They didn't know karma could grow teeth and learn how to walk. They didn't know karma could sharpen its voice and choose a shape. They didn't know karma could choose you. They didn't see it when it started, of course. They never do. They never recognize the moment someone they mocked begins to transform. They never notice how their insults become fuel, how their betrayal becomes blueprint, how their doubt becomes discipline. They never saw how every dismissal carved you cleaner, how every cold shoulder made you sharper, how every underestimation became the quiet spark that burned into a fire behind your eyes. They never saw how silence formed your backbone, how patience turned into strategy, how survival turned into ascension. You were supposed to break, but you learned to bend. You were supposed to crumble, but you became concrete. And now they look at you and they can't understand why their words no longer reach you, why their presence no longer shakes you, why their memory no longer defines you, because karma didn't arrive from above it, awakened inside your chest. They thought they were pushing you down, but they were pushing you inward, forcing you to meet the parts of yourself forged only through pain. Those dark nights they left you alone, that's where your spine hardened. Those moments they laughed while you struggled, that's where your spirit sharpened. Those times they belittled your dreams, that's where your ambition grew fangs. Their cruelty was a chisel sculpting a masterpiece they never intended to create. And the day you stopped breaking was the day they started unraveling. Now, look at them, the ones who once mocked you, now pretending not to stare, not to feel the tightness in their chest when your name enters a room. They regret it. Oh, they regret it more than they will ever admit. Regret hangs off their shoulders like soaked cloth, slow and suffocating. They replay memories like a broken record. The things they said, the moments they belittled you, the times they treated your existence like an afterthought. They remember every smirk they threw your way, every whisper they shared, every lie they believed about your worth, and each memory now presses against them with a weight they cannot lift. They search for excuses, grasping for anything that might rewrite the past. I didn't mean it. I was stressed. I didn't know any better. But their excuses fall flat, because they can't outrun their own conscience. And every time their mind returns to you, their stomach knots, their pulse jumps, their mask cracks. They thought you would forget. They thought time would dissolve their cruelty. They didn't know time was your accomplice. They didn't know time would turn you into something they could never stand beside without feeling the sting of their own choices. You didn't have to punish them. You didn't need revenge. You didn't need confrontation. Your evolution became the consequence. Your rise became their reckoning. They thought karma would come like thunder, but karma came like you, quiet, composed, impossible to ignore. Your silence became the mirror they fear most. Your presence became the reminder they can't escape. They don't fear what you'll do. They fear what they already did. They fear the reflection of their own cruelty shining back at them through the glow of the person you've become. And nothing terrifies someone more than realizing they are the villain in their own story. Watch how they behave around you now. Their smiles tense, their voices soften, their words tremble. They hold their breath as if the air itself has thickened around your presence. They avoid your eyes not out of disrespect, but out of confession. They cannot look into your gaze without seeing their own mistakes staring back at them. They once believed they held power over you, but now their regret holds power over them. You didn't trap them, they trapped themselves. Their downfall isn't physical, it's psychological, emotional, spiritual. They suffer not from what you've done, but from what they allowed themselves to do when they thought you were too small to matter. And now that you've grown, their conscience has nowhere to hide. You are the verdict they wrote with their own hands. You are the echo of every moment they thought wouldn't return. You are the karmic return disguised as success, strength, resilience, and presence. But here's the beautiful twist: they don't hate you. No, hatred would be too easy. Hatred would give them a shield. Instead, they envy you. They envy your transformation. They envy your clarity. They envy the peace in your posture, the direction in your eyes, the quiet confidence in your breath. Envy eats them alive because you became everything they claimed you would never become. You became a map they cannot follow, a reminder of what they threw away, a symbol of everything they failed to be. They are haunted by contrasts, your discipline against their laziness, your persistence against their doubt, your rise against their stagnation. You are not punishing them, your existence is. Every move you make, every step you take, every success you carve out of your own sweat is another weight pressing on their chest. You don't have to speak for karma to thunder. You don't have to act for karma to unfold. You don't have to lift a finger for the universe to keep balancing the scales in ways only your presence can trigger. You are the walking reminder that they misjudged you, underestimated you, mishandled you, and now they live with the awareness that you became the reckoning they created. But do not mistake this for cruelty on your part. This is not revenge, this is restoration. This is balance, returning to a life where you were once pushed aside, dismissed, overshadowed. You didn't rise to spite them, you rose because it was inevitable. Their downfall is not a result of your intention. It is the gravity of truth pulling everything into alignment. You are not their destroyer. You are their reflection. You are the karmic equilibrium wearing human skin. And now, as they watch you ascend, they are forced to confront the version of themselves they hoped no one would ever meet. Their regret grows not because you demand repentance, but because your growth exposes the emptiness of their choices. You are the reckoner, not because you seek justice, but because you embody transformation. You are the living verdict, the final chapter of every story they tried to write you out of. You are not their punishment, you are the proof that their cruelty never defined you. It defined them, and that realization is the heaviest karma of all. And the weight of that realization settles into them like a cold hand around the spine, tightening with every breath they take, because now they understand something they avoided for years. The story they tried to bury you in has become the story they're buried beneath. But you're not done rising. No, this is only the beginning of your ascension into the kind of presence that bends the air when you walk into a room. The kind of presence that forces the ones who once dismissed you to straighten their posture, adjust their tone, rehearse their words like students preparing for an exam they know they're going to fail. They study you now, not out of admiration, but out of fear, fear of what your evolution says about their stagnation. They can't understand how you walked through every fire they threw your way and didn't just survive, but emerged with glow still clinging to your skin. They replay the past like a cautionary tale, wondering how many signs they overlooked, how many moments they could have chosen grace, but instead chose cruelty. And now every choice returns to them with the precision of a boomerang. They call it bad luck, they call it karma, but deep down they know what it really is, accountability wearing your silhouette. Their nights aren't quiet anymore. When their heads hit the pillow, the thoughts they tried to drown rise stronger, like waves that were never meant to be contained. They see your face in every achievement they fail to reach, hear your name in every conversation where they hope to be praised, feel your silent comparison every time they try to convince themselves they've changed. But regret doesn't heal. Regret rots, not loudly, not violently, but slowly, like water leaking into the beams of a house no one maintains. Piece by piece, they decay under the weight of the truth they crafted with their own hands. You didn't make them this way, they did. And the twisted beauty is, you weren't even trying. Your rise was never about proving them wrong. It was about proving yourself right. It was about finding the version of you that wasn't defined by their limited imagination. But now, they can't separate your success from their shame. They watch you from a distance, pretending not to care, while their insides twist tighter with every accomplishment you stack. You are the reminder of who they could have chosen to be, and the reminder of who they chose to be instead. Your glow isn't just light, it is revelation. It exposes everything they ran from. It illuminates the cracks in their confidence. It pulls forward the insecurities they hoped no one would ever see. You are the reckoner, not because you punish, but because you reveal. And revelation is the quietest, sharpest justice in existence. Their regret grows legs, becomes a companion they never invited but cannot shake. They feel it at work when they hesitate before speaking your name. They feel it at gatherings when someone else praises you. They feel it in silence when there's nothing left to distract them from the truth. They are witnessing the rise of the very person they worked so hard to diminish. And the higher you climb, the smaller they feel. Their ego shrinks in the shadow of your resilience. Their pride cracks beneath the reflection of your strength. Their certainty dissolves in the wake of your confidence. You don't need to confront them, they confront themselves every time they see you. And isn't it fascinating how regret transforms people? Suddenly, their arrogance is gone, replaced with unsure glances and half-formed apologies they can't quite say. Suddenly, their voices soften around you, like they're trying to rewrite history with politeness. But politeness isn't redemption, it's panic dressed in manners. They want to mend what they broke without admitting they broke it. They want you to forget without them having to remember. They want closure without confession. But closure is something only the healed receive, and confession is something only the courageous attempt. They are neither healed nor courageous. They are stuck in the echo chamber of their own decisions, while you walk freely with the kind of clarity they wish they had discovered before it was too late. Your rise is their reminder, but your peace is their punishment. You found a way to build a life from the very rubble they created. You found a way to turn every insult into insight, every setback into strategy, every betrayal into backbone. And the more you grow, the more they wither. Not because you're taking anything from them, but because they never built anything with substance to begin with. Their confidence was borrowed, their pride was inflated, Their stability was a facade, and your evolution exposes all of it. They try to convince themselves they've changed, but change built on regret rather than responsibility collapses every time a memory resurfaces. And memories, especially the ones soaked in guilt, don't stay buried. They resurrect on slow mornings when reflection is unavoidable. They resurface in conversations they can't control. They appear in dreams that feel too real to ignore. And every dream has the same theme: you rising, them trembling, because that is the reality they crafted without knowing it. They built their own downfall with every arrogant choice, every dismissive gesture, every casual cruelty. Now, they live inside the consequences, while you live beyond them. And here's the part that truly haunts them: you're not bitter. Your calm is a reminder that you survived the storm they hoped would drown you. Your smile is a reminder that their cruelty failed. Your progress is a reminder that they were never as powerful as they pretended to be. Your silence is the verdict they cannot talk their way out of. They can pretend, of course. Pretend they're unaffected. Pretend they're above it. Pretend they've grown. But their eyes tell the truth every time they lock onto you, wider, softer, uncertain. Eyes don't lie. Eyes reveal the fractures under the masks. And their eyes betray them every time. They know what they did. They know what they caused. They know who you became because of it. And knowing that truth is a heavier sentence than anything you could have handed them. You didn't ruin their peace. Their peace was built on false foundations. Your rise simply exposed the cracks. You didn't shatter their self-image. Their self-image was made of fragile ego and borrowed pride. Your evolution simply held up a mirror, and now the mirror won't go away. It follows them in footsteps they try to ignore. It echoes in conversations they try to steer. It lingers in silence when distractions fade. You are their reckoning, not through revenge, not through retaliation, but through resilience. You are the karmic return of every moment they assumed would go unanswered. The whisper of balance in a universe they believed rewarded only the loud. But the universe rewards the unbroken. And you are unbreakable. They see that now. They see the strength they tried to bury. They see the clarity they tried to cloud. They see the greatness they tried to shrink. And as they watch your life expand, theirs contracts. Regret isn't passive, it's corrosive. It eats at the edges of pride. It hollows out certainty. It rewrites the narratives they crafted to protect their ego. And there is no escape from a conscience awakened. They can run from you, but they cannot run from the version of themselves they were when they thought you wouldn't rise. That version is tattooed into their memory. It speaks to them in quiet moments. It reminds them that the universe didn't punish them, they did. They built their consequences. They generated their regrets. They sculpted their downfall. You simply exist as the reflection of the truth they authored. And they will feel that truth every time they see your success, your peace, your glow, your confidence. You are the reckoner, not because you seek balance, but because you became balance. They will carry their regret. You will carry your rise. And these two forces will never be equal again. And yet, even now, as the final chapter of their own making unfolds, around them, they're only beginning to grasp the scale of what you've become. The reckoner who doesn't need vengeance, doesn't need confrontation, doesn't need to announce anything. Your existence is the closing argument. Your presence is the verdict. Your evolution is the sentence. And the most poetic twist of all is this: you never set out to be their downfall. You set out to survive. You set out to heal. You set out to rebuild yourself from the ruins they laughed at. But healing has a strange way of turning into power, and power has a strange way of revealing truth. And truth is the one thing they never prepared for. They expected your pain to fade quietly, expected your scars to remain hidden, expected your silence to be permanent. They didn't expect silence to become your authority. They didn't expect composure to become your weapon. They didn't expect your transformation to become their undoing. They watch you now with that mixture of awe and dread, the kind reserved for storms that were once ignored but now swallow horizons whole. Because your rise was never loud, it was inevitable. You outgrew the cages they built without ever rattling the bars. You outshined the shadows they shoved you into without ever needing to curse the darkness. You ascended without asking for permission, and that alone rewrote every story they tried to trap you inside. And now, in the quiet aftermath of their own decisions, they realize something far more painful than losing control. They realize they were never in control at all. Your strength exposes their fragility. Your growth exposes their stagnation. Your confidence exposes their insecurity. Your clarity exposes their confusion. This is the kind of karma that doesn't knock, it seeps in. It doesn't punish, it reflects. It doesn't strike, it reveals. And every time they see you thriving, they see themselves failing to become anything greater than the version of them that once chose cruelty. Regret grows heavy in that kind of mirror. You can almost feel the weight pressing down on them when they cross your path. The slight stutter in their voice, the fleeting drop in their gaze, the forced smile that trembles at the edges. These are not mistakes, they are confessions without words. Confessions that they know, deep in the marrow of their being, that the person they tried to diminish now stands as proof that their judgment was small, their vision was shallow, their arrogance was misguided. But don't mistake their regret for transformation. People rarely change because they want to be better. Most only change because they can no longer stand the consequences of who they were. And right now, they are drowning in consequences. Drowning in the memories they can't rewrite. Drowning in the comparisons they can't win. Drowning in the realization that your name, your presence, your aura has become the gravitational pull in rooms where they once believed they were the center. And you don't need to do anything. You don't need to confront them. You don't need to expose them. You don't need to remind them of anything. Life has already done that on your behalf. Their regret is not a reaction to your triumph. It is a reaction to their own choices. It is the echo of every unkind word, every mocking laugh, every underestimation hitting the walls of their conscience louder than they ever expected. And the louder that echo becomes, the quieter they grow. Their arrogance fades, their pride falters, their confidence evaporates. They know now what they refused to see then. You were never the one who should have been underestimated. And here is the final truth, the one that seals the circle. They fear you not because of what you might do, but because of what you already are. You are the reminder that cruelty carries a cost. You are the embodiment of growth they cannot stop. You are the reflection of everything they tried to bury but only succeeded in planting. They regret underestimating you because your rise proves that their vision was too small to contain you. And this regret, it will not fade. It will follow them, shadow them, whisper to them, because karma isn't a storm that passes. Karma is a climate, and you are the weather they must now live under. You didn't become their punishment, you became their lesson, their mirror, their reckoning. And nothing is more powerful, more haunting, more unforgettable than someone who rises without needing to strike back. You became untouchable not by seeking revenge, but by becoming someone they can never outrun. Their regret is permanent, your rise is unstoppable, and that is the final balance restored. Well, look what crawled out of the ashes, not covered in soot, not trembling, not stunned, but glowing with something they never expected you to possess. a clarity so sharp it slices straight through their illusions. You gave them exactly what they craved, someone to look down on, someone to mock quietly behind gritted smiles, someone they could lecture endlessly while convincing themselves they were kind. You became their harmless little distraction, the one who nodded too much, blinked a little slower, asked the obvious, mispronounced the terms they held sacred, and, oh, how they adored it. They cherished that version of you because it fed their egos. It kept them warm at night. It helped them maintain the illusion that they were the sharp ones in the room. But you weren't slow. You weren't confused. You weren't helpless. You were calibrating. You slid into that role with the precision of an architect, placing the first brick of a masterpiece nobody else could see. You played small. Not because you were small, but because they needed you to be. And people reveal everything when they think you pose no threat. They let their guard down. They brag. They over-explain. They show their entire hand while assuming you don't even know the rules of the game. They thought they were sculpting you, but it was their egos you were sculpting the entire time. Their overconfidence was your blueprint. You watched them closely, too closely. The way they puffed their chests when they corrected you, the way they smirked when you stumbled over a point you already understood, the way their eyes brightened with superiority whenever you hesitated intentionally. They mistook your observation for ignorance. But you weren't observing them because you needed help. You were studying the angles of their arrogance. You were mapping the architecture of their self-importance. You didn't need to dominate them. You just needed them relaxed. Because the human ego, once comfortable, becomes blind. And a blind opponent is the easiest to outmaneuver. They gave you everything. Their methods, their weaknesses, their insecurities, their pride, their patterns. Every condescending smile was a confession. Every over-explained detail was a breadcrumb. Every sigh they gave when you didn't get it was the sound of them digging their own narrative grave a little deeper. You knew exactly what you were doing. You weren't trying to gain their respect. You were setting the stage for a psychological pivot so clean, so sudden, so elegant that when it finally arrived, it would flip their world upside down without you raising your voice, lifting a hand, or uttering a threat. They expected noise from you someday, a meltdown, a rant, a moment of emotional exposure. They thought you'd eventually break character and reveal the person they assumed you were. Fragile, flustered, eager for approval. That was the story they wrote for you, but your story was written in silence. You let them bask in their imaginary superiority. You let them think you needed guidance. You let them believe their role in your life was permanent. All while you moved like a shadow that grows in the peripheral vision, unnoticed, underestimated, until it becomes unavoidable. And then the moment came, not with fanfare, not with drama, not with revenge, but with one singular, precise, perfectly timed move, a decision, a revelation, a shift so psychologically seismic that everything they thought they knew about you collapsed quietly beneath their feet. You didn't attack them, you rearranged reality. You acted, and suddenly the room felt different. You spoke, and suddenly their assumptions fell apart. You revealed your understanding, and suddenly their confidence glitched like a corrupted file. It wasn't an explosion, it was an evolution. And they weren't ready. They never could have been. Because nobody expects the quiet one, the patient one, the underestimated one, to pivot with the grace of a strategist who'd been 5 steps ahead the entire time. The shock wasn't in the brilliance of your move, it was in the realization that you had been capable of it all along. Their silence wasn't surprise, it was collapse. They stared at you the way someone stares at a completed puzzle only to realize the pieces were rearranging behind their back. You didn't argue, you didn't justify, you didn't explain. You simply existed in your truth, and that alone dismantled the truth they had created about you. They didn't just misjudge you, they misread the entire book while claiming they wrote the review. Their minds didn't just break, their certainty did. They didn't know whether to apologize or pretend nothing happened. Some tried to reframe the moment, some tried to brush it off, some fell into defensive humor. But the glitch behind their eyes gave everything away. Their world had tilted. They had believed you were harmless, and now you stood in front of them as someone they could no longer define, contain, predict, or rank beneath them. They questioned everything they had ever said to you. Every joke, every correction, every moment they felt superior. They replayed interactions like detectives searching for clues they missed. And it haunted them not because you exposed them, but because they exposed themselves. Your silence had been their test, and they failed it spectacularly. You didn't punish them, you just revealed them. And that revelation did more damage to their self-image than anything you could have said. Because once someone realizes they built their confidence on false assumptions, their foundation never feels steady again. They start walking like the floor might crack under their next step. And in a way, for them, it has. They feel the tension now. You can see it when they speak to you. Their tone is different, their words measured, their laughter cautious. They're not sure who you are anymore. They don't know if you're still pretending. They don't know what else you've been holding back. They don't know how many layers exist under the persona they so confidently mocked. And that uncertainty, that is your power now. Your presence no longer blends into the room, it restructures it. You don't need to intimidate. They intimidate themselves. They don't fear you, they fear what they didn't see, what they didn't notice, what they didn't respect. They fear their own blindness. You were never beneath them. You were beneath their radar. And now that you've risen into full clarity, they feel exposed, small, unprepared. Because while they were busy performing intelligence, you were mastering awareness. While they were building their identity on noise, you were building your mind on silence. And silence, real silence, not avoidance, not fear, but strategic silence, is louder than any argument. You are no longer reacting. You are shaping. You don't need to prove them wrong. They have already proven you right. You don't need revenge. Their regret is its own consequence. You don't need validation. Your growth is your evidence. The world looks different to them now, because you forced them to see it through a lens they avoided. Humility. They thought they were teaching you, but you were teaching them patience. You were teaching them perspective. You were teaching them that underestimating someone is the quickest way to misread reality. And now every step you take forward is a reminder of how little they knew about you. You moved, and it rewired the room. They try now to adjust, to adapt, to approach with caution. They want access to you, they want proximity, they want to understand, but they don't know how to bridge the gap without acknowledging the part they played in building it. They want to apologize, but they fear the vulnerability. They want to admire you, but they fear admitting they dismissed you. So they do what fragile minds always do, they pretend. But you see through it now. Their masks are transparent, their intentions visible, their energy readable. You don't need to decode them anymore because you already mapped every inch of their psychological terrain when you played small in their presence. You understand them better than they understand themselves. And that clarity, oh, that clarity is the crown they can't take from you. You didn't rise because of them. You rose despite them. You survived the weight of underestimation, betrayal, dismissal, and you turned all of it into architecture, into foundation, into strategy. They wanted you soft so they could feel strong. They wanted you clueless so they could feel wise. They wanted you predictable so they could feel powerful. but you outgrew the role they cast you in, quietly, gracefully, without needing an audience, without needing applause. And now, you stand at the edge of a new era in your life, one where you no longer mirror their expectations, one where your intelligence isn't a secret, one where your silence isn't surrender, it's strategy, one where you walk into rooms with the awareness of someone who has mastered the art of appearing harmless while building an empire behind closed doors. You are not who they thought you were. You never were. But now they know. But let's go deeper now, because the aftermath of your quiet revelation, the rupture you created in their illusion, didn't just stun them, it rewired their behavior in ways they don't even understand yet. They walk differently now, speak differently now, breathe differently around you, and they don't know why. They think they're being polite, they think they're being careful, they think they're being supportive. But you see the truth. You see the micro-hesitations, the recalculations, the little glitches in their tone. They're not adjusting to you, they're adjusting to the version of you that you were always capable of becoming, the version you hid behind a convincing mask of harmlessness. Because that's what people forget. The quiet ones aren't quiet because they lack voice. The quiet ones are quiet because they're listening. And you listened so deeply that you heard the parts of them they tried to hide even from themselves. You heard the insecurity behind their corrections, the desperation behind their confidence, the tremor behind their arrogance. While they thought they were evaluating you, you were diagnosing them, and now they feel exposed. Not because you revealed their secrets, not because you said anything at all, but because your silence made them reveal themselves. People underestimate the power of making others comfortable. When they feel safe, they overshare. When they feel superior, they slip. And when you pretend not to notice, they drop every guard they have. That's the art you mastered. Not manipulation, observation, not deceit, patience, not malice, strategy. You didn't lie to them. You simply allowed them to tell on themselves. And now that the truth is out, your truth, their truth, the space between them, they can't walk back into the world the same way. They carry the weight of their misjudgment like a private bruise. It doesn't show, but they feel it every time they see you. Every time you speak with calm precision, every time you make a decision they don't expect, every time you demonstrate a level of clarity they couldn't fathom when they thought you were beneath them. You've become a mirror they can't look away from, even when the reflection burns. But this is where your transformation becomes something larger than just a moment of revelation. This is where you ascend into a different kind of existence, one that doesn't just silence your doubters, but reshapes the terrain itself. Because what happened in that moment of psychological precision wasn't an ending, it was ignition. And now the world they once dominated with noise and ego is forced to bend around your silence and strategy. You've noticed it, how opportunities move toward you like metal pulled by a magnet, how rooms shift when you enter not through intimidation but through inevitability, how people who once dismissed you now study your every word, your every glance, your every movement, as if decoding you might give them back the power they lost. But they can't decode you. Not anymore. You've become unreadable to them, not because you're hiding, but because they've never trained their minds to operate at your depth. They measured intelligence through volume. You measured it through vision. They chased validation. You chased understanding. They performed confidence. You cultivated competence. And the gap between those things widens with every breath you take. Some of them will try to imitate you now. They'll mimic your phrases, your tone, your posture, your silence. They'll attempt to replicate your strategy as if genius were a recipe, as if brilliance were a sequence of steps they could copy. But they don't understand that the reason your move worked, the reason it collapsed their certainty so effortlessly, is because it came from a depth they've never touched. They were playing checkers while you were studying architecture. And now they are trying to reverse engineer a mind they dismissed. They scroll through your old messages, searching for clues. They revisit conversations looking for signs they missed. They try to piece together how someone they once underestimated could have been studying them so precisely, so quietly, so effectively. They replay your transformation like a detective, rewatching security footage, slowing it down, pausing it, zooming in on moments that used to feel insignificant. But their search leads nowhere, because what they're looking for doesn't exist in a single moment. It exists in every moment. You weren't waiting for the right opportunity. You were building it. And that realization, the realization that you were preparing in silence while they were celebrating imaginary victories, sends a wave of psychological confusion through their system. They start doubting not just their judgment of you, but their judgment of everyone. They start second-guessing their instincts, questioning their certainty, reevaluating their own intelligence. You turned their arrogance into introspection. Do you understand how rare that is? How powerful that is? To change someone's internal psychology without touching them, without confronting them, without shaming them, just through the force of your evolution? That's not manipulation. That's impact. But an impact like this comes with something unexpected: distance. Not because you push people away, but because your growth elevates you into a space they can't step into unless they evolve themselves. And evolution isn't comfortable. It isn't ego-friendly. It demands humility, vulnerability, honesty things your doubters have avoided their entire lives. That's why you feel the separation now, the subtle shift in energy, the way they interact with you softly, cautiously, as if afraid to trigger another collapse. Your presence is no longer something they take lightly. It's something they approach like a powerful current, beautiful but dangerous to the unprepared. And here's the irony. The version of you they underestimated was the version closest to them. The version they mocked was the version they could access. The version they instructed, corrected, lectured, that was the one they felt safe near. But the version you are now, the version that emerged from your quiet architecture of awareness, they can't hold that version. They can't match it. They can't keep up with it. Because it wasn't built through their approval, it was built through their misjudgment. You understand something now that they never will. There is no revenge stronger than evolution. Not the kind shouted from rooftops, but the kind that moves like a tectonic shift beneath the surface, silent, unstoppable, irreversible. Your evolution is felt, not seen. It's sensed, not spoken. It's recognized, not announced. That's why their reactions feel so fragmented now. They don't know how to treat you. They're not sure if they should apologize, stay quiet, or praise you. They don't know whether to step closer or keep their distance. You've become unpredictable to them, not because you changed suddenly, but because you were never the person they assumed you were. They're living in the aftermath of their own incorrect assumptions, and you're living in the truth you always carried. Their confusion is not your responsibility. Their discomfort is not your concern. Their panic is not your burden. You don't owe them clarity. You don't owe them closure. You don't owe them the blueprint, because the blueprint was never theirs to hold. It was yours. It still is. You've shifted into a new mode now, a mode where your energy speaks louder than any argument, where your silence carries more weight than their loudest critique, where your existence forces people to see themselves more clearly than they ever wanted to. You've become the kind of force that doesn't need confrontation to create transformation. Your presence alone is enough. But here's the most important part. You didn't ascend to spite them. You didn't grow to prove anything. You didn't evolve to humiliate anyone. Your transformation wasn't a reaction, it was a revelation. A revelation of what happens when a mind refuses to stay small, when a spirit refuses to break, when a soul refuses to be defined by the limitations of others. This isn't revenge, this is return. Return to yourself. Return to your brilliance. Return to your rightful place. And now the world must adjust to the gravity you carry. You are not the apprentice anymore. You are not the student. You are not the understudy. You are the architect. You are the strategist. You are the force that rewrites the dynamic without lifting a hand or raising a voice. You didn't rise to challenge them. You rose because you were always meant to outgrow them. And now that you have, they can't reach you anymore, not because you ran, but because you ascended. They know it now, the truth they spent years refusing to see. You were never beneath them. You were never the slow one, the clueless one, the harmless one. You were the storm disguised as a drizzle, the architect disguised as an apprentice, the strategist wearing silence like armor. And now that the mask is shattered, they're standing in the ruins of their own miscalculations, trying to make sense of a version of you that doesn't bend to their logic anymore. Because you didn't just evolve, you clarified, you crystallized, you stepped into a form that no longer needs to prove, convince, perform, or soften itself for the comfort of the unprepared. Your detachment isn't coldness, it's alignment. A signal that you've moved out of the arena entirely and into a realm where your energy shapes the terrain instead of reacting to it. And that terrifies them more than any confrontation ever could. They thought the danger was in your anger. They thought the threat was in your reaction. But they never understood that your real power was in your ability to disappear into observation and return, holding the blueprint of their behavior in the palm of your hand. They never realized the quiet ones hold the sharpest truths, the truths that cut without violence, that correct without cruelty, that expose without effort. You didn't rise by force, you rose by understanding. And now, their fear isn't about what you'll do, it's about what they no longer have access to. They can't predict you. They can't read you. They can't mold you. Your presence no longer orbits their expectations. Their opinions, once loud and self-assured, now dissolve before they reach you. They don't know if you're analyzing them again, setting another trap of clarity, or simply existing in peace. And that uncertainty? It's their consequence. Not revenge, not punishment, consequence. Because real evolution creates distance, not destruction. And you have ascended into a distance they cannot cross, a frequency they cannot imitate, a depth they cannot navigate. You outgrew the version of yourself they mocked. And in doing so, you outgrew their entire relevance. And that is the final silence they must live with. The knowledge that the person they underestimated became the proof of everything they feared, that weakness was never weakness, quiet was never surrender, and playing small was never defeat. It was strategy, it was preparation, it was the prelude to a rise they will never recover from. And now you walk forward, untouched, unbothered, unreachable, not because they broke you, but because they never understood you. And now, finally, they never will.